Hey guys, how are you? Had to reload our live broadcast because we had some technical difficulties. It's to be expected, right? So, hey, happy Wednesday and hump day. A couple more days until the end of the week. And I am excited to talk to you today about poop. Oh, Dr. Nate, that's disgusting. Why would you want to talk about poop? Well, it's really important why you talk about poop. And the reason why is because your poop can tell you a lot about your health. So I want you to think about it. Many times you've got any kind of health problems that are going on. One of the first places you have to look is what's happening in the gastrointestinal system. I mean, when you think about it, in order for you to build anything inside of your body, whether it's hormones or whether it's new tissue and healing and proper inflammatory response, white blood cells, whatever, you need actual raw materials in order for that to be able to for those to be built. And where do you get the raw materials? Well, you get them from foods. And how do we know whether the foods that you're eating, whether good or bad, are actually getting digested? Are they getting absorbed and they're getting assimilated inside of the body? So there's a lot of different reasons why someone would have a gastrointestinal system that might be off. A lot of different reasons. So always have to look back to the three T's. Is there what kind of trauma has taken place that would create any kind of damage happening to the nerve system? What about specific thoughts or stress, mental stress? What about toxins too? So eating good food, eating bad food, other forms of toxicity, all those things can affect the gastrointestinal system, all the way from the mouth, all the way down to the south end of your gastrointestinal system. So really, when you look at, when I analyze the gastrointestinal system, when they say all health actually comes in the gut, they're absolutely correct. So let's talk about this, because we can determine a lot what's going on by not only looking at food allergies to see how the immune system is reacting to certain things, but you can also look at stool and see how things are actually getting digested and absorbed. Look at your gut microbiome, the presence of yeast and things like that. So, hey, Perla, how are you? Hopefully you watch this on the replay. Please don't watch this during work unless you want to get in trouble with your boss, all right? So watch this on replay. So let's talk about poop, because we've had some interesting cases actually come in, obviously, in which not only do we do food allergy testing, but we just automatically did stool testing too. And this had a lot to do with the patient's symptoms and, 250 questions we had to fill out to see, even if someone's got a thyroid problem, why are we looking at their stool? So really what we're looking at is we're looking at the organ systems that are under the most amount of stress. And many times that actually is the gastrointestinal system. So let's talk about poop. And do you know your poop? It's really important to know your poop. First thing I want to go over with you is a simple test that you can do at home. And that would be just to have a bowel movement and look at your poop. Okay. It's okay. Just tell yourself you're a doctor, have a bowel movement, look in the toilet and see first and foremost what it actually looks like. All right. So what your stool looks like can tell you a lot about how healthy your gastrointestinal system is. And it also can tell you something about what's known as transit time. So is your food going through you too slow, or is it actually going through you too quick? And whether it's going too slow or too quick can tell you a lot about certain things that are happening in the gastrointestinal system. Okay. So here you have your 7 types of stool, and going from type 1 to type 7. So type 1, this would be very hard and lumpy, almost like nuts. A lot of times we call them rabbit turds. All right. So I'm not going to speak in doctor speak right now. So I'm just going to speak how we would normally speak. So here you got, the type 1, which is like rabbit turds. Type 2 would be looking like a sausage, but very lumpy. All right. So this is going to be very large and lumpy, and many times can be painful to pass through. If you've ever had little kids, they've been constipated. A lot of times this is the kind of bowel movements that they're going to have. Then you got type 3, which is similar to a sausage, but with cracks in the surface. The reason why it has cracks is because it's showing how hydrated the feces is. So a lot of cracks in it means that it's very dehydrated. Now, type 4 is the most the best one. That's the one that you want to be shooting for, or maybe pooping for. This would be like a sausage or almost like a snake, very smooth and very soft. And this is actually really easy to pass. And this is going to be the healthiest, where you have this balance between a rapid and a slow transit type. So type 5 would be soft blobs with clear cut edges. Type 6 would be very fluffy pieces with ragged edges and very mushy. And then finally, you got very watery with no solid pieces. So, again, when you're looking at this, obviously when you are having times of infection, or you have some kind of, gastrointestinal infection where, you have diarrhea or things like that, just understand this is, that's okay to have that for a certain time being. And the reason why is obviously if the body has any kind of toxin that's inside of it, then the body wants to expel that toxin. And, the body can expel toxins through a couple of different ways. Well, number one, you might have vomiting. And number two, you may have diarrhea. So just remember, the body's not making a mistake. It's always trying to do the right things to help you adapt, to be able to allow you to be able to heal. So I know that we've had some people who have had like this, intestinal bug that's been going around, and they had, this type 7 type stool for a couple of days as the body tried to get rid of specific toxins inside the gastrointestinal system. Now, if your bowel movements are always type 7, or they're always type 1, or they're always type 2 or type 6, then we got to figure out, okay, so why is this happening? So what is happening from a stress level? Is there any kind of physical stress that's taking place? Is there any kind of chemical stress that's taking place? And also, even mental stress can change your bowel movements as well, just because of stress hormones. So let's talk about, going beyond just what stool looks like. Now, when we do stool testing, one of the questions that we ask is, what does the stool look like? So we want to see, number one, what it looks like, but that's just a little piece of the puzzle. So here I actually have just one page of some that we got a stool sample back from. So basically, when you do a stool sample, you send your stool to a lab and they analyze it for all of these different markers. So number one, the first one that it's going to look for, and this is actually not all of them, but these are just some important ones that hopefully you can identify what makes sense with. The first one is looking at your bacteria and yeast. Now, you have what's known in your large intestine known as the microbiome. And I think everybody has heard of that now. The microbiome is literally the trillions and trillions of bacteria that live in the gastrointestinal system. And in fact, you have more gut bacteria that's living in your large intestine than you actually do cells, normal cells or native cells inside your body, which literally means it's like you have an alien that's living inside of you. So this whole gut microbiome does a host of all of these beneficial things inside the body, including, helping to fight infections, helping to maintain a healthy pH in your gastrointestinal system. It even helps to make specific vitamins within the large intestine, for example. It helps with an appropriate immune response. So, literally, when they say that gut begins or health begins at the gut, they're 100% right. So, you want to look at the microbiome, and not only that, but you also want to look at the presence of yeast and things like that. You can actually see on this test, you can see that this person, you can look, and I cut this off just a little bit, so I apologize, but it's looking at all of these beneficial bacteria, and it ranks it based off of +1, +2, +3, +4. And you want actually all of these lactobacillus and Escherichia coli and all of these beneficial bacteria. Ideally, you want them to be at +4. Okay, so here's is measuring your beneficial bacteria. And then it's looking at ones that are neither good nor bad. And then you got ones that are called dysbiotic. So dysbiotic, we would say it's bad. It creates conflict within the gastrointestinal system. So you can see on here, this person has all beneficial bacteria. Not all of them are +4, so some of them are a little bit low. So this helps us to see what we need to start adding as far as improving the health of the gastrointestinal system. But here's the next one, and this is really interesting, is it's also looking for the presence of yeast, okay? So yeast, if you've ever heard of any kind of like gastrointestinal yeast infection, also like a fungal type infection, this actually is not good. Okay, so this is not good because when you look at this specific test, you see that there's the presence of moderate amounts of yeast. Okay, so there's a yeast overgrowth that's going in the gastrointestinal system. Now, the reason why this is important is you have to look back and look at like history and symptoms that's going on. So in this particular case, this person has been having issues with a lot of acne, been having some issues with a lot of carbohydrate cravings, some brain fog, low energy. Another possible symptoms that you can have is when you have the presence of a lot of things like athlete's foot, jock itch, nail fungus, things like that can be an indication that there is, some kind of yeast overgrowth that's going on in the gastrointestinal system. A lot of times where this starts with antibiotics. And whether you realize it or not, we all are exposed to antibiotics, particularly if you're having non-organic dairy or non-organic meat. You can always have a low dose of antibiotics that are going into you. Now, this is also true if you've ever heard of thrush, for example, and this happens in infants, and particularly if they've been exposed to antibiotics like right in the hospital. And this is where they get this yellow coated tongue. Well, that's actually a yeast infection that's showing up in the mouth. Okay, so especially when the immune system gets very low, you'll see the presence of some of these things start to pop out and express themselves in the skin. Now, in this particular case, you can see that there's a yeast infection that's going on, and that explains a lot of the symptoms that she's been having, over the course of the last 6 to 9 months. So obviously, we have to start doing some things to start addressing the yeast. Now, some other things that we can look at too is we can look at some markers that's looking at digestion and looking at absorption. So how is the body digesting food and how is it absorbing? So when you look at things like elastase, the presence of muscle fibers or vegetable fibers, or the presence of carbohydrates within your stool, what this is actually finding is this is saying like, hey, the body isn't breaking down specific proteins, specific meats. It's not breaking it down, carbohydrates. And that can actually mean that, all the way up into, the stomach and and also the duodenum, is that you may have a problem with the pancreas because you're not secreting enough pancreatic enzymes to actually break down that food. This is particularly important with people who have, reflux and things like that. So, again, this can show you like you can eat all the best foods in the world, but if you're not even breaking them down, they're passing right through you. Even if you're eating organic and this stuff is passing right through, you're buying very, very expensive organic stool, for example. Some other tests that you can look at is also the presence of inflammation. So is there mucus in the stool, lysozyme? Is there the presence of white blood cells? And, this can look at the presence of inflammation. This can also, and this is particularly important when you're talking about irritable bowel symptoms or irritable bowel disease, which, my goodness, a lot of people have. This can signify, if you have some of these elevated, that, yeah, there's a lot of inflammation that's happening in the gastrointestinal system. And another one that you can look at is you can look at like how the immune system is functioning even within the gastrointestinal system. So there's something that's called secretory IgA. Now, in food testing, we measure IgG and IgE. Well, IgA is basically lines any of the mucous membranes inside of the body. So nose, the throat, the esophagus, the lining of the small intestine and the large intestine. And these immunoglobulins, you think of them as kind of like they're the bouncers. So they're the bouncers in the front of the club, and they're kind of like the first line of defense before lets anything in. So, if you have a lot of inflammation that's going on or pathogens and things like that, this is your first line of defense. So you can see if it's depressed or if you can see if it's actually elevated. So we actually had a case where we looked at someone who has been having some symptoms of autoimmunity on other testing. And then when we looked at the stool sample and we see that they have a extremely high secretory IgA, what that means is that that immune system is absolutely working overtime, trying to make sure that it's actually trying to activate more bouncers to prevent other things from coming in or causing some kind of infection. So then you got to start looking deeper, like, is there infections that are going on? I mean, what's happening to make that immune system obviously start to go haywire? So you can get a lot of information just from a stool test. So again, what is your poop telling you? So first of all, look at it and see what it looks like. And then secondly, get a stool test and see what everything looks like based on not guessing, but actually testing. So in these different cases, everyone is different. They're going to get different supplements. They're going to get a different protocol because, like I said, not everybody has leaky gut. Not everybody is bacterial overgrowth, and not everyone just needs a generic probiotic. So in fact, they each get a different type of probiotic based off of their testing. So, hey, I hope this helps. And thanks for joining me for talking about poop. But hey, guys, if you have any questions or anything, send me a message or leave a comment below. And coming up on Saturday, March 23rd from 10 o'clock to 11:30, we're going to talk about our approach to inflammation. Now, remember this, all disease has to start with an inflammatory process. And so we're going to go over the 3 areas where you're creating inflammation so that you can identify where it's coming from, how you test for it, and how you can come up with natural protocols in order to help you overcome all of these 3 different areas of inflammation. This is actually the talk where everyone says this finally made sense as far as why I'm sick, and it also makes sense on what I need to do in order to get well. So if you're registering for that, I think we have a couple of spots still available. I think we have about 30 people that are registered for it. You can register. I left the link in the description of this video above. So you can also register at exemplifyhealth.eventbrite.com, and you'll see the approach to inflammation. Also, when you go there, we just added 2 more events. The next event, I may talk about this next week, let me know, is why cholesterol is literally one of the, or why taking a cholesterol lowering drug is one of the biggest scams in this current century as far as medications and as far as all the side effects, with literally absolutely zero benefit from taking it whatsoever. I know that may offend a lot of people, but listen, there's a lot of people that are getting hurt by taking a cholesterol lowering drug, not only in their body, but it's also affecting the brain. So next Wednesday, I'll talk about that a little bit, but you'll also see that registration is actually live already for the cholesterol talk coming up. I believe it's on April 6th. So guys, I hope you have a great rest of your week. Enjoy. And again, it was a pleasure talking to you about your poop. Have a great rest of your day.